together at the mountaintop, champions of college football.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a roster reset edition of the Coach and the Couch Potato, brought to you by the Bar and Baseball and Softball Academy, Cornerstone Home Remodeling. As always, I am Jeremy the Couch Potato. Opposite side of the screen, we've got Coach Slate. What is going on, sir?
Not much, man. Just enjoying the blizzard that just hit Marion, Ohio today. My daughter's feeling better, so they went outside and played in the snow a little bit. Yeah, so they had fun with it. But yeah, man, how's everything your way?
Good. Just like you said, enjoying the blizzard. It was quite a sudden snowfall in good old Marion today.
Yeah.
Kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, like, I knew we were going to get snow, but I didn't expect to walk outside and, like, my back door not want to open because it was hitting the snow off the step. But, hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is, man.
Yeah, so, we'll jump right into it. We have kind of closed the door on the 24-25 season. So looking ahead, kind of roster reset mode. Obviously this is going to change because you got another portal window. And before we were talking before we came on, there's a couple guys that you very well might see go in that window, depending on how things shake out.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do tonight, we don't want to dive into the 20 or the 25 class as a whole, because we kind of already did that. What we want to do is kind of give some depth chart projections and highlight some guys who we think are going to contribute. I mean, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4-ish guys on the defensive side of the ball that are freshmen that I think are going to contribute a lot.
Yeah.
Now, ironically, on the offensive side of the ball, I've only got 2 that I think contribute a lot. And partially because, like, Turbo Rogers isn't getting on campus until August.
Yeah.
So I think that hurts because with what you're going to use him as, he needs those reps.
Yeah.
So, and obviously we don't know on the defensive side of the ball. Matt Patricia is going to run multiple fronts. So, we'll talk about that a little more in depth when we get there. So I guess let's just start with the most important position on the field. Losing Will Howard, Devin Brown gone. So you've got 2 guys coming back in that room. You've got Julian Sayin, you've got Lincoln Keenholz, and then you've got Mr. All-World himself, Tavian St. Clair, who I would not be surprised if by the end of the year TSC is kind of like what we saw with Julian Sayin last year, the second guy in the room. But I've got Julian Sayin starting, and Lincoln Keenholz is the backup to start.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I do think they're going to try to add somebody in the portal. I think that's been well documented. I do think they're going to try to get, a Gunnar Hope, Tristan Jebbia type veteran that's played some football, but maybe wants to get into coaching, understands like, hey, the NFL may not be in my future. And so I think they're going to try to add that after the spring portal, but we'll see. But yeah, man, I also have Julian Sayin as, the starter, but I'm going to say this, man. I know the type of competitor that Lincoln Keenholz is. He's a dog. I mean, he is just a pure competitor. He's sticking around for a reason. He had so many colleges that would have welcomed him with open arms this spring, just like they did with Devin Brown. And I think he understands, like, I have an opportunity to be the guy. He's only going to be a redshirt sophomore. Like, right. He's still young. He still has time to develop. And so I do think his legs are going to potentially be an X factor in this competition. And the reason why is you mentioned, the Ryan Day interview with Jeremy Birmingham and Austin Ward. One of the things that Coach Day said that he loved about Will Howard is if it's 3rd and 2, can he run and get me a first down? And I'm not saying Julian Sayin can't do that. In the spring practices that I went to, I saw him run. He's a very capable runner. He's just very slight. He's not that big of a guy. I think Lincoln Keenholz can provide that. He's a bigger guy. He's more physical. And so I think that could be a really big part of this competition. But I just think Julian Sayin's processing, his quick release, just getting the ball out, understanding who's going to be calling the plays next year with Brian Hartline. I think you're going to go with the quarterback that can spin it a little bit more, and you find ways to manufacture, that short yardage quarterback, whether it is, using a TSC, whether it is using, a bigger body in the backfield as a wildcat type guy. So I agree with you. I think it'll be Julian, but I'm not counting out Lincoln, man. I think Lincoln's a dog.
Yeah, he's a freak athlete, man. So many people don't realize like how talented this kid is. Yes, he didn't come from a high level of competition, but Ohio State was not going to offer a kid who couldn't play.
Yeah.
I mean, and at the end of the day, Lincoln Keenholz ran Dylan Raiola out of town.
Yeah.
I mean,
he did.
So there's something there. Now, granted, Patrick Mahomes looked like Dylan Raiola in the Super Bowl. So, and then, running back, I think we're going to see kind of what we saw this year. Obviously, kind of unproven versus Travion and Quinshawn.
Yeah.
But I think CJ Donaldson and James Peoples, you could see either one of those guys start.
Yeah.
I think they're going to obviously get the workload. But then I think where it gets interesting is at that third back.
Yeah.
Kind of what we saw James Peoples do this year. And I think it's going to be Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
I really do. But I'm not sleeping on my guy TC Caffey.
Yeah.
I what he brings with experience, talent, he's just good.
Yeah.
But you can't legitimately play 4 running backs and get them all meaningful carries either.
Yeah. Yeah, the running back room is definitely interesting. People talk about experience with the room. Listen, CJ Donaldson has played a lot of football. He is, right around 2,000 career rushing yards. And he's a guy who moved from tight end to running back at West Virginia. And so he is a very talented player. He's a big body. He's a bruiser. I think you get some Beanie Wells light with him. I think you get a little Trey Sermon with him as well. I think they're going to try to trim him down a little bit more and make him more explosive. But I do think he's going to be the guy that starts each game. Kind of like we saw with Quinshawn. Quinshawn was always the first running back that started each game, right? I think it's a bigger body. You got to get him going. And I think James Peoples is going to be that explosive ball carrier that similar to how we use Trey this year. Now, the difference for me with James Peoples is he could be a guy that you give 20 carries a game. Just the physical nature at which he plays and he runs. So he's very capable. So I think those are going to be your 1A, 1B. And I'm right there with you with Bo Jackson. I think his talent, if he could stay healthy, I think his talent is going to be too much to not be that third back. He's extremely fast. He's got, position versatility. He's got so many things that he can offer. And he's physically going to be ready. I mean, he's going to be 215 pounds likely when the season starts. And so if he can stay healthy, I do think he's running back 3. Like you said, TC Caffey coming back from injury, he's going to be hungry. And I think Isaiah West is another young guy that could be good. And we can't write off Sam Williams-Dixon. Obviously he decided to stick around. And so I think it's going to be a real competition for that RB3 spot. And I think that's good, man. I think we need those guys because it's a long season. Played 16 games this year. If you want to make that push, you're going to need 4 running backs that you can really say, okay, if one of these guys goes down, I'm not too worried. I think one of these guys can step up for us. And so I think they can find 4 in that room and be pretty good. And Coach Locke, man, there's not a bigger fan of Coach Locke than me, man. I think he's just a really good job at developing talent. And so I think he'll have this room ready to go.
Yeah, and you mentioned that interview with Coach Day. Listening to him talk about how prepared Locke was when he came in for his interview, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Heading to Zone 6, obviously your top 3 guys are clear cut.
Yeah.
And along with being clear cut, they all have defined roles. JJ and Carnell are going to be your outside guys. I mean, you're going to move them around, but then, Ennis the Menace is your slot guy.
Yeah.
Gets a little hairy after that, I feel like, as far as defined positions, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
My next 3 are Mylan Graham, Bryson Rogers, and Quincy Porter.
Yeah.
I see a world where they might line Quincy Porter in the slot. It's either going to be him or Bryson Rogers. Mylan Graham's not going in the slot.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how they shuffle those 3 position-wise.
Yeah, I think, I agree with your top three. I think Brandon Ennis is on the brink of having a very breakout year. I think he's just been waiting his turn. He's been the ultimate Buckeye. I do
Oh
think
yeah.
there is going to be some real competition with him and Bryson Rogers. Bryson Rogers is such a good route runner. There's a reason why, Hartline wanted him to come back. I think he could do a lot of damage in the slot. Mylan Graham, I think, is going to be that third outside receiver. I would not be shocked if he got a lot of playing time. He's a very talented player, but the kid that I'm keeping an eye on is Quincy Porter. I think he provides something that is very similar to JJ in that he has elite size. And I think having that on the edge, on the outside, especially in the red zone, that's something that I don't think you could really keep off the field. And so I do expect him to be a rotational guy in year one. I mean, obviously he's a consensus 5-star now. I think he is a absolute player. And so I do think after you get through wide receiver 3, with Bryson Rogers and Graham and Quincy Porter, you've got guys who aren't as don't have a lot of experience, but man, you cannot deny their ability. And so I do think there are 5 or 6 guys that could play. And I think, with Ryan Day calling the plays, not Ryan Day, Brian Hartline calling the plays, there is a world where we do have a rotation. I do see that. I do see a world where they do actually do some 10 personnel stuff with 4 wide receivers on the field. Even though we got Max Clare coming in, I do see a world where it's like, hey, Mylan Graham is balling out. Like, we got to make sure he's on the field. We cannot take him off. So I do see a world where that happens. But those top 3, I think, they're locked in, set in stone.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about depth, the tight end room, you hit on obviously the guy who's going to be the starting tight end. And that's Max Clare. Wasn't a need in the portal, I don't feel like, but you can't say no.
Yeah.
When a kid like that says, I want to come there. Now, I will say what sets him apart from every other tight end, every other proven tight end in the room is his ability to catch the ball.
Yeah.
He is that freak athlete tight end with the ball in his hands. Not to say like Nate Roberts can't be that guy, but he's not going to be ready to be that guy from day one.
Yeah.
So I think, Max Clare, and then when you go into your 2 and 3 tight end set, Will Kazmarek and Bennett Christian, I think, because most of the time if you go to that set, it's for blocking.
Yeah.
I will be very interested to see, if you see Jelani Thurman kind of maybe try to go the Demarion Whitten route. And that's another guy in the wide receiver room that, we didn't even think about.
Yeah.
With him moving from tight end to receiver as soon as he got to campus. Now, for Jelani to do that, Jelani's going to have to bulk down. And that's not something that you hear a lot of. But, you saw Kazmarek and Christian both play over him pretty much all year anyway.
Yeah.
And now to bring Max Clare in, you've shot him down. And then you've got the 2 freshmen coming in. Interesting room for sure, but I think that's probably the consensus top 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Max Clare provides something that we saw with Jeremy Ruckert, having that ability to just keep, if you don't want to go 10 personnel, you want to keep a tight end on the field, but still be explosive in the passing game. I think Max Clare really provides you with that. G. Scott, it's not a knock on G. G was a great player for us. He did some phenomenal things. But obviously when he got bigger, his athleticism, really went down a little bit compared to when he first got to campus. And so he really worked hard to be that inline blocker as well. I don't think they're going to ask Max Clare to do that a lot. I think he's going to be flexed out a lot. And I think he could be a guy that you see lined up in a slot and is a matchup problem for those nickels and those linebackers that are going to be trying to guard him. So he's a guy that I think is going to be on the field probably the majority of the time. I do think Kazmarek is somebody who is a total package. I think, people underestimate his ability to catch the ball. You go back to his film when he was at Ohio, he's able to make plays in the passing game, but I think he is an elite blocker. I really do. Yeah. I think he does all the dirty work, similar to what Luke Farrell did for us a few years ago. Obviously, Luke Farrell still playing in the NFL, has had a nice career. And so I think Kazmarek's going to be that. I think Bennett Christian is that as well. I think Bennett Christian, with his opportunities, took advantage of them fully. I think Jelani has continued to develop into a better tight end. You think back to the Tennessee game, one of our first touchdowns where Jelani was the lead blocker, he obliterates, the defensive end. I mean, it was so awesome to see. And then to see the tight ends go celebrate with Jelani, like he is the one that just scored a touchdown. And so I think there's a lot of respect for Jelani. I think we want to see Jelani take that next step of being a dominant player. Many would argue you need opportunities to do that. And so I fully expect him to get those opportunities. He is a freak of nature. And so I do expect him to get those opportunities. What is he going to do with those opportunities? Because he's a guy that we, you and I are big fans of, we want to root for. And there's a very real possibility where it goes from Max Clare to Jelani, where Jelani takes that next step after the spring. And it's like, well, crap, we can't keep him off the field. We got to find ways to incorporate him. And so I'm hoping for that, because I think Jelani could be, a real threat for us in the passing game. And I think his run blocking has developed, so I think it's a big spring for him. He's a kid that I think if, he's not seeing the field the way that he wants, unfortunately, I do think he's a kid that would be like, okay, I'm going to go look for opportunities elsewhere. But God, I'm rooting for him, because I think a 1-2 punch of Claire and Jelani, I think that would be a dangerous tight end combo if Jelani takes that next step this spring.
Yeah, I agree. And, because athletically, I mean, he's probably the second most athletic guy in the room.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. So, I mean, with where we sit at, we both hit on 2 freshmen that we think are going to contribute, Quincy Porter, Bo Jackson. Outside of that, I really don't see a road for a lot of the offensive freshmen to contribute.
Yeah.
So I did not go too deep on the O-line, because I think you're going to see a ton of shuffling. I think you're going to see kind of, guys that can swing guard to tackle to center. And it's crazy how, you go with the interior of this line is a strength now. You go from it being a weakness or a perceived weakness at the start of the previous year. So left tackle, it's pretty much a given. Ethan Onionwa. Yeah.
That's a tough one.
It is. And this is a dude who I can't wait to hear the story.
Yeah.
Of why. And it's not a knock on him, but I mean, this is a kid who was told you're going to be a second-round pick.
Yeah.
And you're at Ohio State now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people can't underestimate, the idea of, okay, I'm a Division I caliber athlete. I go play at a smaller school. There's still that desire to want to see how you would be at the top level of college football. I think there is that desire for Ethan Onionwa, coming from Rice. Rice is this great academic institution. So we're getting somebody who's a very, very bright young man. But I think there's still that part of him that wanted the opportunity to play for a national championship. The thing is, he's going to get paid a lot of money still. And so it's not like he's missing out on that aspect of it. And so I do think, that aspect of being able to play, one of the elite programs in the country, and to be able to say I was a part of something special, I think that goes a long way for a lot of these guys. And so I'm right there with you, man. I think the interior of the offensive line is going to be a strength. I am interested. Obviously, I think our guy Luke is going to be at left guard.
Same.
I think Hinzman's going to, run it back at center. The right guard spot is going to be interesting, because I personally think Tegra started playing better football in the playoffs, but I think Austin Sarabeld was really pushing him, and he's going to be hard to keep off the field. So is this a situation where they rotate like they did this past, playoff run? I could see that they had a lot of success with it, but I think Austin Sarabeld kind of takes that next step. And I do see a world where you see Tegra and Phillip Daniels battling to be the right tackle. I really do. Tegra's going into year 4 in the program. Obviously Phillip is transferring in from Minnesota. And so I think Tegra provides that position, versatility. And so I do think you're going to see him be a swing guy for us. And I think Ian Moore and Josh Padilla will round out those top, 3 backups. I think you're going to see Padilla be able to do both center and guard. But yeah, man, Tegra is the one I want to keep an eye on, because I do think Sarabeld is going to really push him. And so does Tegra take that next step and be a dominant player? Or is it a situation where they have to rotate, and now Tegra is one of the top people that you rotate in if you feel like Saraveld needs a break, or Luke needs a break, or Philip Daniels needs a blow. Like I just think Tegra could be that guy for us as well.
Yeah, so I have Tegra penciled in at right guard, and you hit on the sixth name I wrote down. I mean, obviously Saraveld's a given, but I think Philip Daniels is going to have a war on his hands with Ian Moore.
Yeah,
I think that Ian Moore has been overlooked because this is a kid who was at one point the number one player in the class.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, so he's obviously not trash. Like,
yeah,
but in this day and age, a tackle is never going to be number one overall. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see, how ready does Carter Lowe come in? What do we get out of the Armstrong brothers? I mean, there's a lot of unproven talent there.
Yeah.
But I'm not nearly as worried about the O-line headed into this year as I was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not either. I think towards the end of the season, you started to see us really get comfortable in some gap scheme things. I think we're very athletic on the interior. And I think with Philip Daniels coming in and Onyanwa, and then we hope, Ian Moore takes that next step. I think you're talking about three very athletic tackles that can do a lot of things for you as well. And so that'll be interesting. The tackle depth is something that Carter Lowe's got to come in ready to go. One of the Armstrong twins has to be able to step up for us and be ready to go to provide depth. I do think after this spring, once the spring portal gets here, I do think they will try to add somebody else to that room to provide some more depth. I think it could be a similar situation of a Philip Daniels who's going into his third year in college, redshirt freshman. So he'll have multiple years in the program. I do think they'll try to go that route and get a younger guy that you can bring in and develop as well. So it'll be interesting. And I know Tyler Bowen's already got his eyes, on people maybe that were at Virginia Tech or, surrounding areas in the Virginia area that he's probably got his eyes on if they hit the portal, come to Ohio State and be a depth piece for us and potentially be a starter next year. Yeah,
absolutely. So now things get real interesting when you go to the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
You lose a lot on defense, but as you look, especially in the back seven, there's a lot of guys that played a lot of football here still.
Yeah.
Now the defensive line gets a little sketchy. My defensive ends, I have Kenyatta Jackson. And I'm going to go ahead and call my shot. And I think CJ Hicks starts at defensive end.
Yeah.
And that leaves you Caden Curry, Logan George, and Zion Grady to be kind of that next rotational level. Because I think Logan George is really good against the run. The more you watch him. But I think you see CJ Hicks make the move.
Yeah. I think so too, man, especially with Coach Patricia coming in. I do think you're going to see, us fully utilize that, pass rush specialist. I think CJ Hicks, I think Arvell Reese, I think Joshua Mickens can all three be, very, very good in that type of role. I think Joshua Mickens is a forgotten kid. This kid is special. I was on the recruiting visit where he came to Ohio State, and it was like very under wraps. He was committed to LSU, or was a strong LSU lean, and I was there, and I remember how big of a deal it was for him to be on campus because he is that type of elite pass rusher. And so I do think we have guys on this roster, man, that really fit that Jack Leo role. I do think with Coach Patricia coming in, you're going to get the best version of CJ Hicks. I think it's Arvell Reese is going to have to be a guy that goes down there sometimes. I really do. I think, that's where he started when he came in. I think he's a very good linebacker, but I think our linebackers are going to be really solid, with Peyton Pierce and a few other guys. So I think it's another guy you're going to see rotate down as a defensive end at times as well. And so I agree. I think Kenyatta and Caden Curry are going to be your top 5 techniques that are going to probably rotate quite a bit. Logan George is going to be in there. I do think with what we do defensively, potentially do defensively, I do see a world where Kenyatta could bump down inside, where Caden Curry could bump down inside, where Logan George could bump down inside. So I do see a world where that happens. But yeah, I do think CJ Hicks is going to get that opportunity as a pass rush specialist. Hopefully he can be our version of Abdul Carter.
Yeah. And then on the interior D line, I think Caden McDonald and Edric Houston are clearly 1 and 2.
Yeah.
After that, you've got guys like Will Smith, who I think is probably going to be in that next rotation. Jason Moore. But I think the freshman name to keep an eye out there is Jarquez Carter.
Yeah.
I think this kid is just too good to not play.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the way that, you hear stories of how excited Larry Johnson was to get this kid. I think he's a freak of nature, and I do think he's too talented to keep off the field. I do think he's going to be a guy a la Edric Houston this year that rotates in quite a bit. I do think Caden McDonald he's going to be a first-team all-conference player. I really think he's going to be a dominant player for us, similar to what we saw with Tyleik Williams. I think Caden McDonald is that good. I think Edric Houston is going to take that next step as a really, Ed Oliver type of 3 technique for us. I really think he has that potential. Jason Moore's got to be a guy that steps up for us. Jason Moore, bigger guy now. He's well over 300 pounds, and so he's still getting adjusted to being that big, but he's got to step up for us on the interior. Will Smith, God, I'm just rooting for that kid, man.
Yeah.
I'm just rooting for that kid. A legacy, obviously, his father was on the national championship team. Rest in peace, because he was so good. And I think Jarquez Carter is going to be in that mix. Obviously, you have Eric Mensah, another big body that could be in there as well. Maxwell Roy, another big body that's coming in as well. So I think there are young guys that can play. But there's not a lot of proven talent. So this spring in the weight room and whatever we do spring practice wise is going to be vital for that group.
And you still got Taiwan Malone. I mean, that's another guy.
Yeah.
Linebacker gets interesting because it all hinges on what the formation is. Obviously Sonny Styles has a spot, plain as day. If you see Arvell move down more, I think Peyton Pierce is in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Riley Pettijohn is going to potentially be a dude that starts. I mean, I think he's just too good. And there's kind of a need for, obviously there you could see a Sonny Arvell, Peyton Pierce kind of package, but I don't think you see Arvell and Peyton Pierce on the field at the same time.
No, and I think, with Patricia coming in, I'm glad you brought up Taiwan Malone. No disrespect. I think Taiwan Malone is going to be a huge part of that rotation. What a selfless dude. His mom is fantastic on social media, diehard Buckeye. So shout out to Taiwan Malone. We didn't mean to forget you, man. We think you're going to be in that mix as well. I think, and this is my wheels are turning with an NFL coach coming in, doing whatever it takes to win football games. I see a world where Arvell Reese becomes somebody who is an Abdul Carter type for us. Maybe not this year, but in the years to come, right? I think he's got that elite ability, and I think they feel that way because of Peyton Pierce and Riley Pettijohn. I think Riley Pettijohn is too good to keep off the field. I think he's one of the better linebacker prospects that I've seen. I had the opportunity to really coach one this year in CJ, so I was able to see it up close. Dude, I think Riley Pettijohn is like on another stratosphere. Like, he is just an elite player. And so I don't know if he starts. I don't know what that looks like, but I do think he is a guy who gets in for us quite a bit as a freshman. I also think, Peyton Pierce, man, I think he is a forgotten guy because I think he's a stud. And so I love the fact that Matt Patricia is going to put these guys in the best spots to help this defense stop the other team, regardless of where it's at. And so I do see a world where, CJ and Arvell Reese are the guys that are rotating as that Jack or Leo guy. I see a world where that's a possibility. And I think it's because Peyton Pierce or Riley Pettijohn are going to be very good players for us.
Well, and the other cool thing is, Matt Patricia has no loyalty to any of these guys. No. So this is truly a case of Matt Patricia can come in and make the best decisions for the team.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
The corner room gets very interesting. Obviously IGB is going to be a guy.
Yeah.
I think IGB rotates with Jermaine Matthews, though. I don't think you see IGB and Jermaine on the field at the same time. Well, and again, I think you could see kind of what we saw this year, where IGB is struggling, Jermaine comes in, and he's on the field with Denzel Burke. Burke's struggling, one of those other guys comes in. And I say that because Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez are, we saw Aaron get meaningful minutes this year at times.
Yeah.
And as much as we talk about Riley Pettijohn, we talk about Jarquez Carter, Devin Sanchez is on another level.
Yeah,
I mean, this guy is. And then in the slot, I think Lorenzo Styles gets the start there. And I think, you mentioned before we came on, you might see Bryce West move into a slot role, which is very possible. But I think at least at the beginning of the year, it'll be Miles Lockhart that moves down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think the top two guys will be IGB and Matthews. I think Matthews has really earned the right to be the starter, and I think IGB is earned the right to continue to be the starter. Now, with guys that we have coming in like Sanchez, there's going to be real competition. And so I do see where we're going to rotate those guys quite a bit. I mean, we had a legitimate 3-man rotation at corner this year. I think we could have a 4-man rotation at corner. I really do. I think Aaron Scott is a stud. I think he's got all the ability. He's a big body kid. But I also could see where, we talked about Bryce West being in the slot. I could see where, I could see Aaron Scott being the guy that goes into the slot. And I could see Bryce West staying outside. Like, Aaron Scott reminds me so much of Jordan Hancock and the way that they're built, the physicality that they play with. And so I could see those guys being interchangeable. I do think Lorenzo Styles is going to get the nod as the nickel. I like Miles Lockhart as well. Obviously, he's just young. I think Bryce West's talent is hard to keep him off the field, but I could see where, Aaron Scott is, maybe he's the guy that they slide inside to compete with Lorenzo Styles. I can see that, but I think this corner room is so talented, man. I mean, from top to bottom, there's just an immense amount of talent. And so it's going to be fun to see all these guys go out there and compete. But, I think IGB and Jermaine will be the top two.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see. Not probably, the most no doubt position on the defense is the one safety spot. Caleb Downs, I think he's got a starting spot. I mean,
yeah.
Now the other safety spot gets a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
You've got I can't think of his name. I just drew a blank. Jalen McClain.
Jalen McClain.
I think it's either going to be Jalen McClain, but again, I think there's a freshman that has a very legit shot at that spot, and I think that's Fahim Delane.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Fahim Delane is an elite safety. I think he's gone under the radar and kind of been overlooked in this class, how great he is. But I think Fahim Delane is going to battle to be a starting safety for the Buckeyes. I really do. I think Jalen McClain is going to make him work, though, because I think Jalen McClain and his opportunities this year showed that he could be pretty freaking good. He is a thumper. He's got athleticism. He's a ball hawk. He can do all those things. And so I think Fahim Delane and Jalen McClain are going to have a good competition. Do not sleep on Malik Hartford as well. Remember, Malik Hartford, as a true freshman, played quite a bit for us. There was a lot of trust from Jim Knowles in that safety room for him to go play. So I think he's going to have a say in what goes on back there. I also think guys like Leroy Roker are going to really step up. Leroy Roker is a ball hawk, man. I think his range could provide something for us on the back end. And then Kenneth Nelson Jr., you're talking about a guy who came from the SEC and transferred in last year. Don't forget about him. But I do think, the top 3-4 guys, you're going to see Downs, McClain, Fahim Delane, and Malik Hartford. I really think, Malik has something to prove. I really do. I think he's going to really push McLean, and I think Delane is going to push everybody in that room because he's that talented. So I'm excited, man. Delane's probably my favorite prospect in the 2025 class, and I think he's another kid, man, that it's just going to be hard to keep him off the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of guys that have played some snaps, but a lot of unprovenness still.
Yeah.
But, you have leaders in Caleb Downs, IGB, Sonny Styles. Like, you've got guys who are going to make sure that these young guys come in ready to roll.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we pretty much nailed all of the guys who I think can contribute as freshmen. Another name, though, is I'll be interested to see where does TJ Alford fall into this too.
That's another kid who could be a Jack. That Leo type of guy who's getting after the quarterback. I mean, I think he's a special player. James Laurinaitis targeted him for a reason. And I think with NIL, with, these kids, they've got to play earlier. If they don't play, they're going to leave. And so, you've got to really think about that stuff. And so these freshmen are going to rotate in, man. That's just the way that it's going to be from now until the end of time. And so we just got to get ready to see some younger guys out there.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, here's the thing. This schedule is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we will break this down way closer to season, but last year we both picked the Buckeyes to win the Natty. I don't think I'm picking the Buckeyes to win the Natty next year. I mean, it is what it is. But that's okay. You're not going to win the Natty every year.
Yeah.
Are they a playoff team? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if we get bad Julian Sayin, or, he gets hurt or whatever, that might change things. But, you've got guys behind him. So it's going to be real interesting to see. Long term, I think out of that freshman class, I think Devin Sanchez, I think Riley Pettijohn, and I think TSC are obviously probably the three most important guys, with Quincy Porter probably being fourth.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I do think, TSC is a huge part of that freshman class, obviously. It's weird with Julian Sayin transferring in. Now you're looking at a situation where he's going to have to wait his turn, but I think he's a true leader. I think he's going to develop and be an absolute stud for us. But the kid that I think has got to come through for us this year is Jarquez Carter. And I think because our defensive line, interior, is just so unproven. And he's so talented, man. I've watched his highlight film probably 20 times. And every time I watch it, I understand it's highlights, but just the way that he plays, the technique that he plays with, the quick first step, he's just a kid that is going to be hard to keep off the field. And he's got to step up for us and be, that number 3 guy for us potentially. And so I'm excited about him, man. Him and Riley Pettijohn, obviously going on the defensive side, go figure. I think him and Riley Pettijohn are just very talented players, man. I'm pretty pumped up. They're Buckeyes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see, though. I mean, the potential's there. I mean, because some of these guys are truly special.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, you need opportunities for growth.
Yeah. So
this year, especially on, I feel like the defensive side of the ball is going to be the epitome of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting though. I think that, that's kind of a nice little wrap up to the roster reset. It's been a pretty slow Buckeye week. Buckeye basketball team took one today.
Yeah.
Who would have thought Bruce Thornton airballs a 5-footer to end the game?
Yeah.
But I think he expected the defender to be there.
Yeah.
I gotta say though, this is the time of year where we dive into some other sports. What the NHL is doing right now with this 4 nations thing, if we don't get a Pro Bowl that tackles after this next year and an NBA All-Star game where they play defense, they should just quit doing them. Because the NHL, you got the face of the league, Connor McDavid, out there getting smashed by the U.S., forecheckers. And I'm not a hockey guy by any stretch of the imagination, But to hear the Canadians booing our national anthem last night, I was pissed. and obviously the Kachuk brothers were too.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 3 fights in 9 seconds.
Yeah, man. Hockey is it's a different world, man. We've got so the last 2 schools I've taught at, we've had hockey, and it's just a different world, and I have so much respect, man. I think they're the best athletes in the world. I think what they do on the ice is insane, man. And so, yeah, the NBA All-Star game, whatever, it's a joke. I'm sorry. The Pro Bowl, listen, I understand why the Pro Bowl is not a thing.
For sure.
I get it. Like these guys are making $200 million now. Like I get it. So, but hockey does it the right way. And so, hopefully these professional leagues figure it out and do what's best for the fans. One quick side note, WNBA team coming back to Cleveland. Excited about that.
The Rockers.
The Cleveland Rockers. I'm excited about that, man. That's going to be great. I think 2028 is when they're going to get started. And there's a lot of money that's going to be invested into that franchise.
$250, I think.
Yeah, I'm pumped up about that. Listen, you can tell I'm a girl dad, man. Anytime there's more opportunities for women to go out there and do their thing, like, hey, I'm the #1 fan. So shout out to the city of Cleveland for making that a possibility, man, because I think it could be really good.
Year too late for Juju, though.
Yeah, I know. I know that.
Obviously there will be another super talented face. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously, I feel like in this year's WNBA draft, Paige is going to be #1, I would think. But and then, so Juju's a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, she could leave early, I guess.
Yeah.
But you don't normally see that in the women's game. WNBA note, though. I don't know if it's just because I'm paying more attention to the league now. Trades. That league has gone crazy on trades. You got Kelsey Plum getting traded, who is one of, I don't know, I would say the top 10 players in the league.
Yeah.
And as part of that trade, our girl JC Sheldon got traded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, And you hit on something with NBA All-Star Weekend. Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama, you should be ashamed. Out here trying to cheat in the skills contest.
Do what you got to do to win.
And they still lost to the Cavs.
I know.
And Mac McClung, dude. So yeah, I mean, sports world, that's kind of the wrap there.
Yeah.
I don't know that I got anything else.
No, man. That's all I got.
All right. Well, with that said, we will hop off of here. We will see you guys most likely next week for an opening drive. I don't envision anything crazy happening midweek.
Yeah.
But if it does, we'll be here.
Yeah.
Obviously brought to you again by Cornerstone and the Barn. Memorabilia World note. Ryan Day private signing coming up. You can drop items off at Polaris. I might actually share the post on the Facebook. It's like $139 an item, which for Coach Day, not bad. You got people like myself who are still contemplating doing natty team items. He's kind of a big part of that. So we'll see. I don't know. But yeah, with that said, we will see you guys most likely next week.